My name is Ms. Jessa. I'm the Teen and Workforce Development Librarian here at the Groton Public Library. I'd like to welcome you all to our introduction to asexuality with Cody Daigle. Oh, Cody Daigle-Orians?
Orians.
So Orians. Yeah, I got it the second time. Okay. I will let too much time lapse between learning it and then having to say it again. So welcome to Cody Daigle-Orians. He is a TikTok influencer known as Ace Dad Advice. He's also an author, educator, and he's here to introduce us to asexuality and just kind of give us an overview. So welcome and thank you for taking time out of your day today to join us.
Oh, my pleasure. So I'm going to share my screen. We can get going. Do that. All right. So screen is good.
Screen looks good.
Great. So first, I just wanted to say thanks to Jessa and the library for having me here tonight. It's really cool because this is ACE Week, which is an annual weekly celebration of all things ACE to raise awareness about the asexual community and our experiences. So getting to be here tonight as part of ACE Week is a very cool thing for me. So thank you. So tonight we're going to talk about asexuality. We are going to answer some fundamental questions about what it is and how it works. We're going to look at who's a part of the asexual community, discuss some misconceptions about asexuality, and hopefully shed some light for you on one of the queer community's less visible communities. So why am I the right guy to be leading you tonight? Because I am an asexual writer and educator. I'm also a content creator. As Jessa mentioned, I create Ace Dad Advice, which are videos, and it's a video project that's designed to sort of help young people and anyone who is questioning their sexuality find the courage and confidence to live their best ace life. And you can find me on TikTok and Instagram, YouTube, all the places where people are on social media. And probably most importantly, I'm asexual. So that gives me a sort of leg up in this conversation to tell you more about our community. So at this point, I just want to do a little disclaimer about asexuality and two of the cousin identities to it, aromantic and agender folks. So while tonight is going to be focused on talking about asexuality, which is often known as the A in LGBTQIA, there are two other identities that share that space with us. Aromantic folks and agender folks are also part of the A in LGBTQIA. And while all of these three communities share some commonalities, each of them are very distinct and individual identities and experiences. Although most people sort of assume that if you are one, then you belong to the others as well. But being one won't assume the others. And while we don't dive into very much about the aromantic community or the agender community tonight, I did want to acknowledge them in the conversation as part of that A in the acronym. So let's dive into the big question. What is asexuality? So I think for a lot of folks who are not familiar with our community, that's a really tough question to answer. I think when you're discussing asexuality with most folks, they have a very particular image in their head, and it looks something like this. For a lot of people, the image that gets conjured in your head when you hear asexuality or asexual people is of a kind of genderless, sexless, relationship-less, personality-less person, that we are folks who are kind of a blank slate of human relationships or interaction. And honestly, this could be, nothing could be further from the truth about asexuality. The asexuality or the ACE community is a really vibrant community of people who experience a very wide spectrum of different experiences. Asexual folks come from all walks of life, and we are far more than this blank slate idea that some people hold about us. So let's go in with some definitions and talk about what asexuality is. So what is asexuality? Asexuality is a sexual orientation that includes individuals who do not or rarely experience sexual attraction. Now, we're going to break that down a little bit later, but that's really the whole shebang when it comes to asexuality. We don't or rarely experience sexual attraction. Now, it seems very simple in definition, but as all things are, gets more complicated in practice. But that simple definition actually describes a wide spectrum of experiences and relationships to sex. So in order for us to start breaking down this definition, I kind of want to start with sexual orientation. So sexual orientations can be grouped into two main groups. You have allosexuals and asexuals. So allosexuality contains all of the orientations for people that do experience sexual attraction. So allosexuality would include heterosexuals, homosexuals, bisexuals, pansexuals, omnisexuals. If you experience sexual attraction, you're allosexual. And on the other side of that spectrum is asexuality, people who do not or very rarely experience sexual attraction. And what I think is important here in this distinction is to note that asexuality isn't an absence of sexual orientation. We aren't missing like heterosexuality, and we aren't missing homosexuality. It isn't that asexual people are missing an orientation. Asexuality is a sexual orientation in and of itself, just like all the other orientations. It isn't an absence. It's just another way of being in the world. So if we leave allosexuals and head over to the asexual side of the sexual orientation spectrum, we can start to break down the next part of that definition. Do not or rarely experience sexual attraction. Now, asexuality, like all things human, is a spectrum, and this umbrella of asexuality contains kind of four big tent identities. I sort of sometimes call them the major arcana for my tarot friends. These are kind of four identity markers, and they cover the range of experiences inside asexuality in a really broad way. So while asexual is used as the overall umbrella term, asexual is also an identity marker inside the spectrum. Asexual folks are people who identify as not experiencing sexual attraction. So if you, as on the whole, do not ever experience sexual attraction, asexual is the identity label that would probably fit best for you. This is how I identify. Then we also have gray asexual or gray sexual folks. And this part of the asexual spectrum describes the experience of people who sometimes experience sexual attraction, but mostly don't. This, as the name implies, it's in that kind of gray area of a relationship to sexual attraction. So for anyone who feels that, sometimes they experience it, but it's not very often, mostly they don't, gray sexual might be the right word for them. We also have demisexual folks. So this identity marker is sometimes housed under gray sexuality, and it's sometimes positioned on its own. Either is really okay. But demisexual folks are people who only experience sexual attraction once they've developed a really strong emotional bond with someone. So for demisexual people, they will generally experience the world as an asexual person, not really feeling sexual attraction to anyone. But once an emotional bond is developed with someone, when that relationship is formed and that bond is formed, then they will experience sexual attraction. So it sort of works as gray sexual, but it's a very specific kind. That's demisexual. And then we have ace flux, and this identity marker describes folks whose relationship to sexual attraction changes. So sometimes they will maybe identify as asexual, sometimes they will feel like they are allosexual, maybe sometimes it's demi, but it changes a lot. It's constantly moving. It, as the name implies, is in flux. So it's important for ace flux folks to remember their experience is a shifting thing. It's something that's constantly moving. Now, these big four identity markers aren't the only identities that exist under the asexual umbrella. There is also an entire world of microlabels that help describe experiences in the community. Now, the microlabels describe very specific relationships that people on the asexual spectrum can have with sexual attraction, with sex, and with how they relate to others. So whether you're allo or ace, sex is really complicated and there is no monolithic experience of sexual attraction. So microlabels evolved in the asexual community to address that diversity of experience. They help people in the A spectrum further clarify how they're experiencing sexual attraction and how they can find others who share those more specific experiences. There are a lot of microlabels. The microlabel universe is constantly evolving, so we won't go through them, but just good to know that they're there. I really appreciate microlabels because I feel like they demonstrate how diverse the experience within the asexual community can be. So who are the asexuals? Who are they? I thought it would be interesting to sort of describe our community and let you know who really is in our community and how it's made up. So all of the info here comes from a 2014 study done by AVEN. They're the Asexuality, Visibility, and Education Network on the demographics of the asexual community. And it and multiple studies will note that 1% of the population, the whole population of the globe, identifies as asexual. So we're a very small percentage of the overall population. We'll start with age. So this will show you that the asexual community is young. AVEN research found that the median age of respondents to this community survey who self-identified as asexual was 17. And the median age when respondents disclosed their asexuality to others was 19. And remember, that's the median. So the community, the open community, the visible or self-identified ace community is very young. And I think this is why it's often perceived that asexuality is something that was like made up by the kids, or it's like a youth thing. But I really don't think that's fair. I think these age numbers are considerably skewed because of how accessible information about asexuality exists. So most of it exists online, and a real online home for information about asexuality didn't really exist until about 2001. And most of the discourse in the community continues to exist online, and especially on online places like Tumblr and TikTok. So all of these platforms do skew younger. So it makes sense that younger folks would have encountered this information sooner than maybe folks who are my age. There are a lot of older asexuals in the community. A lot of us come to the community a little further along in life. Like, for example, I didn't come out until I was 42, and it was because I discovered asexuality on Tumblr. So thanks, Tumblr. But while the visible community might seem young, there are a lot of us who are past that median age of 19. They're asexual folks at every stage of life. So next we'll talk about gender in the community. The community, the out community for asexuality is overwhelmingly female. You'll see the 61% identify as female, only 13% of self-identified asexuals will identify as male, and 26% identify as non-binary or some other gender marker. Again, I think here there's more operating than what we see at first glance. I certainly don't think that asexuality is any kind of like a particularly female experience. I think there are more male asexuals out there. I think because of social constructs and the social pressures that men face to fill certain social roles, particularly those kind of roles of like being the aggressor and being like the hunter-gatherer kind of thing, that it makes men less comfortable identifying with asexual because then they're not filling those roles. It makes asexuality seem like not something that would relate to them. I do think there are more male identifying asexuals out there. And I think very recently the 2019 version of this community survey came out, and there was an uptick in the number of men identifying as ace. So that's good news. In terms of race, the community, the visible community is overwhelmingly white. And again, I think here there's more operating. I don't think it's statistically more likely that white folks are going to be asexual, but I think because of the way whiteness operates and the way it determines access to online communities, the way it creates safer spaces for white queer identities than BIPOC queer identities, I think it's generally more likely that you're going to see white folks openly self-identify as asexual. And then that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where it appears that sexuality is just a thing that white people are, even when that's really just whiteness at work. There are some really incredible Black and BIPOC activists in the ACE community that are changing that. One in particular, Yasmin Benoit, who is doing really incredible work and engaging very deeply in the conversation that BIPOC ACE folks should be more visible in our community. So now that you kind of know who we are and you understand what asexuality is, I want to talk about like how asexuality works and to kind of deepen and dig into this idea about sexual attraction, what that is and how it operates. So let's talk about what attraction is. So in this context, you can think about sexual attraction as our innate attraction to someone or a person, a kind of person that makes us want to have sex with them. That's a general definition for sexual attraction. You can think of sexual attraction as like your factory settings. It's directional. It's an attraction that is aimed at a specific person, like your partner or your spouse, or a kind of person. So for example, if you're heterosexual, your sexual attraction is directed toward people of the opposite sex. And when we think about attraction, we have this cultural idea that attraction should operate as sort of a monolith, that what the ideal attraction looks like, it would be that all of your attractions are all bound up together. So sexual, romantic, mental, we want all those attractions to be wrapped up together. And we want to feel all of those things for someone in this powerful rush of totality. It's the cultural ideal for attraction, and spoilers, attraction just doesn't work that way. In reality, attraction works very differently. Our attractions aren't all knit up together in one. And in fact, they all operate very independently of each other. And there are many kinds of attraction you can feel for another person. So yes, we have sexual attraction, that desire to make you want to have sex with the person. You also have romantic attraction, an attraction to a person that makes you want to develop romantic connections with them. We have aesthetic attraction to the way a person looks or the way they carry themselves. Intellectual, an attraction to the way a person thinks or engages intellectually. Sensual attraction, that's an attraction to a person that makes you want to experience non-sexual touch with them. So that's like maybe just touching or kissing, hugs or cuddling. And then there's alterous attraction, an attraction to a person or kind of person that makes you want to develop an emotional connection with them that exists somewhere between platonic and romantic attraction. And there are other attractions that exist for us too. And what this understanding of attraction does is sort of make attraction much more complicated and more complex. Each of these attractions are operating independently within you and all of us. Now, for most people, all of these independent attractions do all work in the same direction. So if you are gay, then all of your attractions are going to work in the direction of someone of the same sex. You'll be sexually attracted, romantically attracted, sensually attracted to someone who is of your same sex. But that isn't how it works for every person. For some people, these attractions do work independently and they work differently. And for some people, these attractions don't even happen at all. So this idea about attractions working independently of each other is called the split attraction model. And what the split attraction model says is that all of your attractions can work very independently of each other and sometimes in contradictory ways. And also sometimes you can have one or more of them operating and one or more of them not operating at all. And the split attraction model provides a really good explanation about how asexual folks experience the world. You know, for me as an asexual person, my sexual attraction slider is at 0 all of the time. But that doesn't turn off the other sliders for me. I do experience romantic attraction. I do experience aesthetic and sensual attraction, but I don't experience sexual attraction. And other people can have different combinations of those sliders. There are asexual folks who also don't experience romantic attraction. Those folks are asexual and aromantic. And you can even have situations where even if you're on the allosexual side of the spectrum, your individual attractions can work differently. So this is sort of a picture with the split attraction model of what identities can actually look like. So you can be a homoromantic asexual person, which is me, that's how I identify. But you can be a bisexual heteroromantic person, someone who is maybe sexually attracted to people of more than one gender, but are only interested romantically in someone of the opposite gender. You can be heterosexual and aromantic, so you can experience sexual attraction but have no desire for a romantic relationship. And as I mentioned, you can be asexual and aromantic, ace-aro, and just not experience attractions on either of those sort of central scales. So what I appreciate about the split attraction model is it helps to make sense of how asexual folks cannot feel sexual attraction, but can still experience other kinds of attractions and also act on them. And the split attraction model also helps allo folks parse out parts of their attractions that maybe don't work all in the same direction. So we've talked about attraction, but I want to talk about libido because these two things, attraction and libido, our sex drive, are often assumed to be the same thing, but they do work independently. So do ace folks have sex? Yes, because some do. So whereas attraction, which we talked about, was directional, sex drive and libido work differently. You can think about sex drive and libido as a volume settings as opposed to those factory settings. You can think about libido as like a volume on a radio, whereas your sexual attraction, how you identify that way, is like the song. So who you are sexually attracted to is the song that you're playing all the time. And libido, or sex drive, is really just the volume that tells you how loud that experience is. So do ace folks have sex? Yes, some of us do. Asexual folks can still have a libido, can still have that general want to experience physical pleasure that way. So for asexual folks with libido, sex can become a way to answer that drive, even if you're not experiencing sexual attraction. You know, even if an ace person has a low libido, they may experience a comfort level with sex as a physical activity or find some other reason to want to have sex with a partner. That could be like enjoying intimacy, or maybe just enjoying pleasing their partner. Maybe it's about building a family, or maybe it's about seeing sexual activity as a way to express other attractions to someone. So that ace person isn't feeling sexual attraction, but is still having sex, and that does not sacrifice their asexual identity. So really important to remember, having sex doesn't make you allosexual, and having sex doesn't make you less asexual. So when we're thinking about asexual people on the spectrum and their personal relationships with sexual activity, we have some language that helps break that down for us. You can be an asexual person and identify as sex favorable. That means that you're someone who enjoys or maybe seeks out sex, but you do not experience sexual attraction. You're comfortable participating in it. You're comfortable engaging with it as an idea, talking about it. It's something that you feel very comfortable with and you're favorable towards. There are also sex neutral folks. So these folks have no feeling either way about sex. They are, as the label explains, very neutral about it. So if you're sex neutral, you may engage in sex or you may not. It may be a part of your relationship, it may not. What's really key about asexual people who identify as sex neutral is that there is really no strong feeling in either direction about sex as an experience. Sex-averse folks can feel maybe comfortable with the idea of sex, so there will be some comfort level in sort of talking about it, hearing about it, encountering it in the culture. But sex-averse folks will not want to participate in it themselves. So sex-averse folks are very likely not going to be having any sex, but there isn't a kind of overwhelming negative feeling about it. Comfortable in the abstract, less comfortable in the practical. And finally, sex repulsed folks. So for these ace folks, they experience a very strong negative feeling about sex and will not participate in it. And they can also not be comfortable hearing about it, talking about it, or engaging in it. These negative feelings for sex repulsed folks can sometimes be really very strong, and they can sometimes manifest as physical responses. And for sex repulsed folks, sex is not only off the table, but it also carries just really strong negative feelings as well. So that pulls together how varied the spectrum of asexuality can be. No, it's not just not having sex. That simple definition of a sexual orientation for folks who don't or rarely experience sexual attraction really opens up into this wide spectrum of experiences that captures a very broad spectrum of relationships to sexual attraction, and also a very broad spectrum of relationships to sex itself. So there isn't a monolithic way to be ace. You know, sex is really complicated, whether you're allo or ace, and not experiencing sexual attraction is also complicated. So there are many, many ways to be ace. So I wanted to talk about some of the big misconceptions about our community, and answer them and hopefully dispel them with you here tonight. These are some of the big cultural assumptions and stereotypes that we as ace people really struggle against. And really, if there's anything that you leave here with tonight, I'm hoping that it's letting go some of these misconceptions about us. This is a big one. Asexuality isn't a broken form of another sexuality. So as I said at the start, we aren't missing some other orientation, and we aren't a broken version of another orientation. Asexuality isn't the result of something broken in you. It is a fully valid, whole way of experiencing the world unto itself. It's just a part of the way that human beings can relate to sex and sexual attraction. It is not a deviation from some norm. It is one of the norms that are possible for human beings. Yes, there are a lot more people who are allosexual than there are asexual, but our size as a community doesn't determine our validity or our worth. And it's just important to remember that we aren't broken. We're just part of the variety of human experience. Asexuality isn't the result of a medical or a mental issue. And I think this is a really powerful one because it causes a lot of harm to ace folks. There is a large cultural norm called compulsory sexuality, which in short is this cultural idea that sex is essential to human fulfillment, to being like a whole human. Compulsory sexuality says that unless you are having sex or wanting sex, you are somehow failing at being a person. And it's the idea that everyone naturally wants sex. So if you don't, there must be something wrong with you. So often doctors and therapists, when confronted with asexual folks, see our experience through this lens of compulsory sexuality and assume that asexuality is the result of a medical issue, or maybe it's some kind of mental block, or is the result of trauma, which leads to a lot of ace folks being unnecessarily medicalized. Ace folks can often experience the same kind of response from the people closest to us, from our families, from our partners, from our husbands and wives, from our friends. They can also see our sexual identities through this particular lens and assume there is something broken or wrong with us medically or mentally, and encourage us to seek out help for our asexuality. And sure, some folks do have hormone issues. Some folks do have hangups about sex. And for some people, trauma does cause very significant changes in how they experience their identity and how they experience sexual attraction. But it's crucial that we shift this assumption that every instance of asexuality means you need to get to a doctor of some kind. We as a culture, and particularly the culture, the medical culture, we need to include asexuality as a valid form of existence that doesn't require medicalization and that doesn't require fixing. Asexuality isn't a phase or something the right person can change. This is more compulsory sexuality here. You know, if folks don't assume that your asexuality is some sort of medical problem, they will assume that it's temporary. That's maybe just kind of a passing thing. And this is very often leveled at young ace folks because there's also an assumption that young people don't really understand what's happening to them. And I think it's always very harmful to negate someone's lived experience, regardless of their age. But it's more harmful to do that in a community without a lot of visible representation in the world. So ace folks can go through a lot of confusion on their way to understanding themselves. And it's not due to asexuality being temporary or them just not finding the right person to activate their allo-ness. That confusion comes from us not seeing our experience reflected in the world. There's very little visible aceness in popular culture, in conversation, in any kinds of sort of formal education about sex. And I lived this experience for 2 decades. I didn't see asexuality in a real way until I was in my 40s. And it was only then that I was really able to see through this lens of asexuality, see myself fully for the first time. So I think it's really important that when anyone in your life says, I think I'm asexual, support that exploration instead of shutting it down and dismissing it. So that was a really quick and furious distillation of a community discourse that we could really be talking about for hours. And I wanted to leave a lot of time for any questions that you may have to kind of deepen these ideas. So I'm under no illusion that I've explained asexuality to you in its totality. There's a lot we didn't cover, but I hope that you have a little better picture of what we're doing, who we are as a community. I wanted to encourage you to check out these 2 books, The Invisible Orientation, An Introduction to Asexuality by Julie Sandra Decker, and Ace by Angela CHEN. These 2 books are wonderful resources that you can probably get through your library. You can get them through, perfect. Yeah, you can get them through your library. You can read these really nuanced and incredibly helpful descriptions about what our community is. Decker's book is really like Ace 101. If you are new to asexuality, it's a fantastic guide to kind of break the identity down and help you better understand it. And Ace by Angela CHEN does a really wonderful job of contextualizing asexuality in the larger culture, talking about what asexuality teaches us about sex and society and desire and gender and race. Both books are really fabulous. And if this was an inspiring conversation to you, research more, learn more. Those 2 books are a great place to start. And I do this at the end of talks. So if there's anyone here who is ace, who thinks they might be ace, who is maybe still in the closet, or who tonight, maybe you saw something in your experience for the first time, I just would like to say that I'm incredibly proud of you, especially to say I'm proud of you during ACE week. Um, I'm proud of our community. It's a very difficult thing to be something that the world thinks you shouldn't be. So wherever you are on your journey, I think you are doing a great job. Be proud of who you are and keep going. And to any of the Allo folks here tonight, thank you for being here and learning a little bit about us. I hope you continue to learn about us, and I hope you can become really good ACE allies. These are the places that you can find me on the internet if you would be so, where I talk a lot about asexuality and do a lot of that's where all of my asexuality education and content exists. And yeah, let's talk about asexuality. Ask me stuff. I would love to like have this conversation with you.
Awesome, thank you. So for anyone who wants to participate, feel free to put questions in the chat or in the Q&A. I already have one little thing popping up that there is a Q&A question. So our first question is, can you sometimes feel sex neutral and sometimes feel sex averse? Is there fluidity between those different classifications?
Yeah, absolutely. Just as we throughout our lives have constantly changing relationships to our identities, the same thing goes for our relationship to sex. Yes, you can move. I sometimes will move from being sex favorable to feeling sex neutral. Like that changes a lot for me. Totally, you're not stuck into that particular label. And I say this all the time about labels in general. Labels are tools, not tests. So when you think about all these words, if asexuality is what you're exploring, you're not beholden to that language. You don't have to like pick one and you're stuck there forever. The language of asexuality is for you to help describe what you're experiencing. So if it changes, change the words.
I like that. I like the idea of tools, not tests. That's a great way to explain it. I know one thing that I was going to ask about is, so I work with teenagers and I'm constantly learning because it turns out I am old now. So we recently had a group that told me about demi boy and demi girl. And I was curious if you had any insight as to what those are on the demisexual spectrum.
So you're gonna put me on a spot on gender. So no, that's okay. This may be like a rough definition, but as I understand it, so like demi boy and demi girl kind of work in sort of the same way that like demisexual does. There is a kind of, it's in that middle space. But if someone in the chat knows better than I do about those definitions, I would defer to them. Because yeah, those the kind of the gender micro labels. It's thank you. I appreciate that.
I didn't realize it was a gender orientation. So right there, I'm learning. And thank you for the chat answer. Does anyone have any additional questions before I just keep asking ones that pop into my head? Just taking a skim through, give you a chance to type. Awesome. So you already gave us that beautiful ending speech. Is there any, I know this is kind of your thing anyway, but is there any advice you have that you would like to share with the audience?
Well, I guess if I would say for like for people who are already out as ace, and I've been thinking about this a lot this particular week. If you are out as ace and you're comfortable being out in the world, I would encourage you to be out as much as you can. Of course, being out is everyone's choice, but we lack people in the world, particularly people who are older, particularly who are men, particularly who are people who are bi POC. We lack a lot of visible representation. And I think a lot of times in the community right now, we rely on things like BoJack Horseman, or we rely on that one scene in Sex Education that everybody sends you when you come out for like representations of who we are. I think we as ace people in the community are the best representation that you can have. So as best you can, be out, even if it's just to a friend that you know, or maybe you're comfortable enough at your job. Finding a way to be visible helps everyone in the community and helps make everyone's journey through asexuality a little easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And so as someone who may be allosexual, who's having someone who's ace coming out in the workplace or in your friendships and relationships, what is your recommendation to them on how to make a more open and representative experience? Like,
I would listen and affirm. I think that's the best thing that we can do for anyone who comes to us and shares something about themselves that's a challenge for them. When we don't understand, if you are in the situation where it's something that's a little confusing to you, we kind of have the tendency to sort of push those things away or not necessarily. It's hard to make space for that. But that is the kindest thing that you can do to any ace person who comes to you and shares that with you. Just make space for that. Let them tell you about their experience and share what being ace means to them. As we kind of talked about tonight, when you say I'm asexual, that could mean 1,000 things. So let whoever is close to you who is ace explain what it means to them and what that language means, what their experience is like, so that you can know them better. I think if an ace person shares that part of their life with you, you should think about it as a gift. And it's a gift of trust, really. So honor that and hold space and listen.
awesome. Thank you. I haven't seen another question pop up yet in the chat, so I'm just going to keep grilling you, just throwing one after another.
I'm good.
So you have a presence online, and obviously we are all either already following you or about to. Do you have recommendations of other people we could follow to kind of broaden our perspectives and learn more?
Yeah, so if you're on TikTok, my absolute favorite ace TikTok creator is Asexual Memes, at Asexual Memes. Her account is wonderful. She's incredibly funny. She's funnier than I ever could be, but is also incredibly smart and kind and a great educator. It's a wonderful account to follow. You'll learn a ton. And there's also another TikTok account, Visibly Ace. Her name is Brooke. She is incredible and offers a lot of really sharp insight about the experience of being ace. And she is older too. She would probably kill me if I said she was older. We're nearish the same age. We're nearish the same age. But I really appreciate her perspectives. On TikTok and Instagram and other places, follow Yasmin Benoit. She is probably our most visible ace ace creator and ace activist. She is doing really incredible things all over the world, really, to support and make asexuality more visible. She's definitely someone to follow. I think her work is just incredible.
Fabulous. And we do have a recommendation for you from the chat. On Instagram, there's someone, I put the ace in disgrace, which is punny and already winning points.
It is in fact a great account. Yeah, I follow them on Instagram and it's a wonderful account. Yeah.
Awesome. Fabulous. So still no additional questions popping up in the chat. You guys are welcome to do. Oh wait, there's a Q&A one and I missed it. I'm so sorry, Anonymous. All right. So this one says, is it weird that there's sometimes I feel like I want to be in a QPR, which I need a definition for when you have a moment, or sometimes I want to be in an ace allo relationship, but also sometimes I feel like I don't want to be in a relationship at all?
Well, I don't think that's weird. I think that's what you want. We get told a lot that the things that we want or the things that we feel are weird. So recognize that that's not you. That's not the truth. That's the world telling you that. If you want different kinds of relationships and those things feel safe and good for you, pursue them. There's nothing weird about that. In queer platonic relationship, QPR is a queer platonic relationship. So those are kind of relationships that exist. They're deeply committed relationships that don't necessarily have a romantic dimension to them. So they're not friendships. They're not just platonic relationships. They're more deeply committed, but they do not include a romantic dimension as well. They're in that space.
Awesome. I'm learning so much today, and it's like from you and also from our audience. So thank you, everyone.
It's just like being on Twitter.
Oh, fabulous. All right. So no more red bubble in the Q&A. And then we do have a continuation in the chat. Sometimes I don't know if I really don't like sex or I feel anxious about pretending to be allo during sex. I can see how that would cause some anxiety. Absolutely.
Yeah, I hear that's like that and things like it. I hear a lot where people who are sort of questioning their identity, particularly they're questioning themselves on the ace spectrum, question their experience, but then question how they are perceiving their experience. There feels like a real anxiety to make sure that they're getting it right. You know, that I'm really understanding what's happening and I'm totally understanding. It's okay if your understanding of your experience evolves over time. For example, when I first came out as ace, I came out as gray-sexual because that's what I understood my experience to be. And that's just where I was at that time. But the more I thought things through, and the more that I read, and the more that I engaged online, I realized, well, okay, no, that's not really quite my experience. That's me projecting something or misunderstanding how I'm experiencing. So then I shifted to just identifying as asexual. That shift is perfectly fine. You're not making a mistake, or you're not failing at identity if you change your label or you change how you understand yourself. These are complicated questions around sex and identity. It's okay if it takes you a while to get to the one that you land on, and that the one that feels the best for you. Just have grace with yourself and give yourself time. However you feel the answer is now, if that changes, that's okay.
That's awesome. In light of that particular question, I thought I would also ask this one, in that it sounds like there's a lot of self-advocacy, right? And just speaking your truth when other people might be questioning you and you're questioning yourself. So do you have any advice on that level, on, how to learn to trust yourself and your feelings, but then also how to stand before someone else and say, this is who I am?
I guess I would one thing that has helped me and continues to help me, because I'm not always good at this, is being thoughtful and separating what the messages of the world are and what the messages from me are. We will sometimes internalize those messages about the world, that we are broken, or that we are just need to meet the right person, or that there's something wrong with us. We'll internalize those, and we'll mistake those for kind of our own voices. Take the time to separate those two. When you're just repeating what the world tells you, that's not you. You can let that stuff go and just focus on what you know to be true right now. In terms of I don't know how to be brave to share it. I mean, I would just remember that it takes an incredible amount of strength for you as a person to understand who you are. So if you've gotten to the point where you're like, you know what, I think I'm asexual and I'm ready to tell other people, if you were strong enough to say the first part, I'm ace, you are strong enough to tell anybody. You have an incredible amount of strength in you. So don't feel like you don't have what it takes. You did the hardest thing. You accepted yourself. Now you can go into the world and share who you are, because your strength is boundless.
That's beautiful. Thank you. So building off of that, so now you're out here in the world. Do you have any general advice for dating or being in a relationship with allosexuals?
So yes, because I'm in two. I'm in a polyamorous relationship. So I actually have two partners, and they are both allo. So the best advice I can have is be honest about what you want, be honest about what you're comfortable with, and be honest about what your boundaries are. The best way that you're going to, and this is true for any relationship, a relationship is only going to work if everybody comes to the table and is honest and communicates about what it is that they want and what it is they need. For ace people, that's even more important because there are probably expectations from an allo person that are different from what we might be comfortable with. So be clear about what it is that you want. And ultimately, don't be afraid to say the thing that you want. Like, you don't have to change who you are just to make it work with an allo partner. You don't have to, it's not required that you as the asexual person have to compromise yourself to fit the needs of your allo partner. Compromises it, like a relationship is a two-way street. You both have to come together and meet that. So know what your boundaries are, and then don't apologize for them. Don't say like, oh, I'm so sorry that you have to deal with my asexuality. Don't say that. Your asexuality is part of who you are, and that's what you bring to a relationship. And if they're interested in you, your aceness is part of that. So don't apologize for it. Be clear about your boundaries, and like, good luck with the allos because they're yeah.
Awesome. All right, so from here, I do have one more in the Q&A, and we're going to be taking a bit of a turn from the internal stuff and talking about book recommendations. So our person would like some additional book recommendations, and they loved the book Loveless by Alice Oseman. Usman. I feel like Usman is the proper pronunciation of that.
So other books. I really love the book How to Be a Normal Person by TJ Klune. It's a really lovely kind of YA romantic comedy that with an ace lead character that is really well written. I really like it because it's a male-male relationship, and that I respond to that because I am homoromantic. And I just thought it was a charming book where the ace character was treated really respectfully and lovely and in a lovely way. That is due to TJ Klune being ace himself. So it was cool to have an ace writer telling an ace story. It's always great. And I can never remember it's the first book in the Wayward Children series by Seanan McGuire. It has a wonderful ace character in that book, and I love that. Every Heart, thank you, Rebecca. Every Heart a Doorway. I love that book. It's terrific. And then as I shouting out to Carly's book, The Reckless Kind by Carly Heath is a book that's coming out in November. It has an ace protagonist, and it's a really, really great book. I like this book a lot.
Awesome. As book lovers, I'm sure we all will take all of those to heart. I'm excited about TJ Klune. I'm gonna have to go look for more. So we have another question in the Q&A. Is it irrational to be angry about people's dismissive response whenever they hear anything related to asexuality? They say that we should be patient since asexuality is not that known, but I feel like I'm just repeating myself and telling that asexuality is valid.
Thank you for asking that. No, anger is an entirely appropriate response to injustice. Period. So if you are experiencing some kind of aphobia, or if someone is sort of like, if you're in that situation, anger is a perfectly valid response to that. Something unjust is happening to you. That is a perfectly valid response. Of course, they're going to tell you that you should be nice about it and just deal with it. That's of course that's going to happen. As best you can, I always say, like, anger's a really is an appropriate response, but also try to do something constructive with your anger. Because, like, if you can turn your anger into something constructive, if you can take that anger and turn it into a teachable moment, that's great. Do that if that's in your skill set and you have the spoons to do that. But no, it is not irrational, and it is not wrong to feel angry at aphobia in whatever form it takes. It's a natural response to that kind of thing.
All right. So thank you. I really enjoyed that answer, and I appreciate it. And it inspired another question while you were answering. How do you deal with intrusive questions? So now we've gone from people not recognizing to being overly involved. This particular example is a teacher who is asking questions about that. So a teacher asking about your sex life, asking about your asexuality, which is crossing so many boundaries, and we should talk about that at a later date.
All the red flags. Yeah.
Yeah.
I, because of my very public, being a very public asexual, I do get a lot of really invasive questions sometimes. So this is kind of my canned response. I am happy to talk about the ideas of asexuality with you, but I am not going to talk about the mechanics. Happy to talk to you about like what asexuality is. I'm happy to talk to you about how people maybe experience it in a general way, but I'm never going to talk to you about the mechanics of it in my life. I'm just drawing a clear boundary there. It's totally okay to draw that line and say the mechanical side, in the personal side, that is off limits to you. You don't get that. But I'll talk about definitions. That's fine. I'm comfortable doing that. Even with people that I know, I'm sometimes very hesitant to talk about things in that very specific way. So you can draw that fine line. I divide it into like ideas and mechanics. I'll talk about one, but not the other.
So it sounds like setting boundaries and making sure you support your boundaries is very important.
For sure.
So we don't have another in the Q&A. We do have a comment in the chat. I perceived I was being asephobic with myself all these years. Every time I told someone about my asexuality, I did it laughing about it. And I just want to say, I hope that you have internally, come to terms with yourself and that you fully accept yourself now, because we fully accept you. And I'll let Cody continue on that.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, don't feel bad about that, because I'm 3-4 years into having come out, and I'm now I'm like ace dad on the internet. But I still have days where I like tell myself that I'm broken. I still have days where I feel like I'm not worth it, and I'm not going to be worth someone's time or attention. I still struggle with that too. I think we always do. It's these things are hard, and you live a life where people don't really accept you immediately, and you go through a lot of things. Oh, hey, thank you. It's okay to sometimes struggle. You don't have to come out and then be perfect all the time. You can still struggle, and it's okay. It's okay.
All right. So just kind of skimming the Q&A, checking the chat. But yeah, you guys have been an amazing group. I love how supportive you've been with each other. I've been watching the chat and seeing your comments to each other. This has just been absolutely like heartwarming and educational and just all around good feelings. So thank you, all of you. So again, last chance for that burning question you might have. Obviously, if you think of it later after we've all hung up, you can find Cody all over the internet. You can search Ace Dad Advice, search his name, and then many of you took photos of that slide. And just, thank you for being an active part of this conversation. Thank you for joining us tonight and sharing your wealth of knowledge. I've definitely gotten a lot out of it, and it seems like everyone has too.
Yeah, so, this has been lovely. Thank you so much.